August meeting of the Ann Arbor Cable Communications Commission. I'm Chairman Roger Sutton, and as Lisa Wondrich, the Communications Director for the City of Ann Arbor, reads off the roll, you learn who else is here.
Roger Sutton.
Here.
Bart Clark. Tony Ramirez.
Here.
Dave Chappelle.
Here.
John Torgerson.
Here.
Jack Eaton.
Here.
Thank you. First order is approval of the agenda. It was distributed ahead of time. Are there any additions or editing or deletions? Hearing none, I'll assume that it is approved. Next, the approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which was February of this year. Similarly, any additions, subtractions, or edits?
I move to approve it.
All those in favor? Second, sorry. Did we have a second?
A second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, the CTN report.
Actually, public comment.
Oh, excuse me, public
Sorry,
comment,
Roger.
I'm sorry. Looking too far down the list. And we do have a public commenter today. He's Tom Wright from the Michigan, he's a consultant with Michigan Media. Oh, gosh, two or three things that you're a consultant to, aren't you, Tom?
Yes.
But please, come on
Tom,
to the
could
chair.
you, yeah.
First, I would like to thank the board for having CTN here as a public service for Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County, and beyond. I have worked for NPR, PBS, advertising and commercial broadcasters for over 20 years, and am most impressed here in Ann Arbor at the skills that are offered to be learned by the excellent staff that is at CTN. I've taken the entire set of workshops and now am doing work on a commercial basis that I was not qualified to do previously. And I do think there's opportunities for people in the community that are not being utilized. For instance, I would love to see every single workshop that is put on totally utilized, totally filled. In many cases, they're not. I work with the Bob Woodruff Foundation out of New York. They are now utilizing CTN studios to produce things and then merge them with existing videos they've created over the last 11 years. So that's bringing ABC News content to the local community. They are most impressed with CTN. And I know our veterans, I work with Fisher House, Michigan, which is looking to build a Fisher House here in Ann Arbor for veterans. I know that jobs is one of the largest problems that our veterans have. And if there's ways that we can utilize the training here to help our veterans that are in the area, it would be a great skill, and I speak from personal knowledge, having taken the classes. Secondly, I am also meeting with Detroit PBS, and they were unaware of the great services that are being offered here. The studios here are state-of-the-art, and we have been utilizing people from University of Michigan to do things. We just did an FYI group thing with the Youth Impact Program and Jack Harbaugh. The staff here did an excellent job. The University of Michigan Athletics was most impressed on the professionalism, etc. They couldn't get anyone from the networks to come out to cover this, and they were thrilled that CTN was available, which just tells me there's so much opportunity to utilize CTN. The other part of CTN that is most impressive is that it's simulcast over the internet, And as a result of that, that can educate people not only in our community, but nationwide and worldwide on the great things that are going on in our community. I just can't say enough about how I think CTN needs to be continued, and if there's any ways that we can bring new revenue to CTN so that this can even be a further expanded service, would be happy to utilize my contacts to do so. And lastly, I am hoping at some point that I can assist this board in helping you all do the great work that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any commission members that have follow-up questions for Tom?
Tom, it's my understanding that you don't live in the city of Ann Arbor.
That's correct. I do work with a number of companies and belong to a number of organizations here in the city of Ann Arbor. I belong to Bethlehem United Church of Christ. I am a member of the Rotary Club of Ann Arbor, and also do consulting work for varied companies here in the city of Ann Arbor. I really think that Saline and many of the surrounding areas who attempt community television would be far better partnering with Ann Arbor so that we could even offer a better service beyond. Because why go it alone when these communities could be better served putting their resources in partnering with Ann Arbor instead of not having the staff, et cetera, that the city of Ann Arbor has.
And so I brought that up because Tom and I have talked previously, and the council can appoint a member of the commission who doesn't live inside the city. It just takes a greater vote. I believe we have at least one vacancy, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And so
Yeah.
I'm going to encourage you to, apply. And
Already did.
Okay. And when that comes forward, I'll advocate on your behalf.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for the work that you do for the city of Ann Arbor, because it reaches far beyond our community.
Thank you.
For those watching on TV or on the web, that question was posed by our city council representative, liaison, Jack Eaton.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the CTN report, which I tried to jump start a little earlier. Greg McDonald, the director or manager, will present that.
Okay, since we didn't have a meeting in May, April, we have two reports I'm just going to go through the highlights on. If you have questions about anything, feel free. So back in January, we completed a second series of Let's Watch programs that we do to help promote the Ann Arbor Film Festival. We held the City Council DDA work session here in the studio. We had an 8-week Rec and Ed training camp begin. That's, if you noticed, the kids that are running around out in the office, we're doing one this summer as well. We also began offering some new equipment for the public to check out to do production work, including laptops for editing, DSLR camera, and a digital audio recorder. In February, we did our annual coverage of the Public Schools Orchestra Night. We also began regular monthly coverage of the newly created Ann Arbor Transportation Commission meetings. We covered another Allen Creek Greenway Master Plan. We also did a joint meeting of the Washtenaw County Board of Commissioners and the EDCC, which I think is Economic Development Corporation Commission something. We concluded our high school winter sports coverage, and we completed installing cameras in the basement conference room at City Hall, which is another location that we cover meetings. Right now, the only ongoing meeting is the Human Rights Commission that meets down in the basement. Then in March, we had our annual coverage of the Environmental Excellence Awards. We covered the Packard Square update meeting, and we began soliciting bids for replacing the editing shared storage system that our producers use. And we also began testing out live streaming meetings on our YouTube page, which if we go to the next report, in April, we began live streaming our meeting coverage on our YouTube page. So we're now live streaming in 2 spots. So if people have difficulty with watching the live stream on our Vibit page, they can go to our YouTube page. That live stream is only there when the meeting is actually live. So if they go to it a few minutes early, they won't see anything, but once the meeting begins or shortly before it begins, they'll see it.
Do we run some type of info slate when the meetings are not in progress?
No, we've looked into that, but we haven't started doing that yet. There's nothing on the page to indicate right now when they're not there. But one advantage of it is that the meeting is there immediately when the meeting ends, when the live stream disappears and goes away, the file is actually right there for people to view. We also had our annual coverage of TEDx Youth. We completed transitioning our CTN productions to start producing them in high definition. We've had the equipment all along. We're sort of doing things in standard def. Now we're just doing them in high def, although when you watch it on cable, it is still standard def is what you're seeing. But we also have the high definition files online so people can view those as well as download. Then in May, we covered a town hall meeting put on by the county. We completed our high school spring sports, and we covered another Nixon Road update meeting. And in June, we had our annual coverage of the high school graduations. We hosted another council meeting with the Planning Commission here in the studio. We began producing a new series, Adventures in Parenthood, and some of our staff who are recent parents had gotten together and thought it would fill a service a need. We didn't really have much programming on the channels regarding parenting issues, so we started doing that. And then we produced our Candidates Comment program for the upcoming primary election. And those are the highlights for the last 6 months.
Any questions from commission members?
I taped one of those candidate comments, and I found the staff to be very, very helpful and supportive. If that's the encounter that everybody in the public has, then I think that you have a lot to be proud of here.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We'll move along then to regular business, the first item of which is the Comcast State Franchise Agreement application. Just a quick explanation for the public. Back in 2006, the state of Michigan passed a law that moved regulation and a lot of the answering for local cable commissions and cable channels to the State Public Service Commission. And so the channels, except in some instances where they were grandfathered, no longer make their applications directly to the city, but to the state, and then the state, if it approves it, passes it along for approval to the city. One of the things that I've always been uncomfortable about is that takes away a period of negotiation between the city and the cable channel, and we end up, not necessarily, but very often, simply saying yes to the state commissions, yes. Please go ahead, Lisa.
So Comcast submitted a state franchise application on July 25th to the City of Ann Arbor Clerk's office, which then was forwarded to the City Attorney's office, who would be reviewing it for its completeness, and then preparing resolutions and documents then for it to be sent on to City Council. Per the state law, City Council only has 30 days, or the city has 30 days to either deem the application incomplete and go back to Comcast or approve it. If no action is taken, the application automatically is approved, and that's per the law. However, in this instance, the application that was submitted maintains CTN's, the city's, 5% franchise fees, 2% PEG fees. The city attorney's office also will be inserting language within the resolution that CTN has 4 Comcast cable channels. Not that Comcast was arguing that fact, but just to have that officially on record that we do have 4 cable channels that we intend to maintain. So as far as the agreement goes, we would be maintaining our current level of funding, which would be apples to apples to our agreement, which is expiring September 30th. So this application then that they're submitting then would be a 10-year franchise agreement that then obviously would then become our franchise agreement after that September 30th expiration. Just to remind you, AT&T in 2016 had submitted a state franchise agreement that went to City Council and was approved. So they're currently in their they're currently in their 2nd year then of that 10-year agreement. So once I'm expecting, I haven't heard that the application was complete, and that goes to City Council, then we would have 2 state franchise agreements with AT&T and Comcast. Once the document is available in Legistar, I will forward to the Cable Commission those documents so that you can view them. I don't have access to them at the moment.
So AT&T only carries 1 channel, right? That's it?
So currently we had piloted our Channel 16, our public meetings channel on their 99 program, and then I guess we'll have to talk about how or when we wanted to roll out additional channels to be available via AT&T.
So having the 2 franchise agreements in place would give us considerable stability over the next decade.
Yes, that's true.
I like stability.
I do.
So all of the language from the last agreement that had to do with internet and stuff, that's all been taken care of. It's been cleared up with the purchasing of service and wires and things like that. Comcast there was a whole section in there about
The iNet.
The iNet.
Yes, that's completely finished.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you recall too, John, because I can't remember how long that you've been a member, that 2 years ago, the Cable Commission, as part of the budgeting process, had approved funding for a rebuild of the iNet with our fund balance.
Okay.
That then becomes the city's asset.
Right.
And we no longer would be paying Comcast to maintain it or rent it.
Okay. Good.
And so that's a good question, because this does remove within that September 30th expiration date. Our iNet completion should be done, and that becomes a IT asset that they will be overseeing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We'll go on then to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of low-power TV business case. Just to note, we had had some discussions at several of our previous meetings of the possibility of CTN or the Communications Office of Ann Arbor to run low-power TV of our meetings, so that those who have eschewed cable and perhaps even dropped off the web could over the air hear and watch those meetings. Please go ahead.
So more than a year ago, I had submitted to the city attorney's office a legal request about whether or not franchise or PEG fees could get utilized in this endeavor. I've yet to get an answer back, but what has transpired, I've spent time corresponding with the attorney who the work had been assigned, and she is still asserting, though, that she doesn't have enough information from us to make that determination. In lieu of that, I do believe that it's accurate to say that there isn't anything in our ordinance that would prohibit us moving, towards offering low-power TV. The ordinance is pretty broad in the sense of offering CTN or communication services. So I'm not an attorney, but I do think that that's logical that the ordinance itself wouldn't prohibit us from moving in that direction if it were available. So what I'm proposing for the commission to consider then, in talking to IT and others and trying to get this moving forward for lack of a answer from the city attorney's office, we typically, and what I had passed out for you all, which is an internal document, so if you can just keep it for your own education, when business units are looking to make a significant purchase or implementation, we prepare business cases. I'm sure anyone, with a business background is familiar with something like this. And I know, John and Greg, that you've done a lot of the legwork already. And I provided this business case hoping that John, maybe, not to put you on the spot, but you might volunteer in taking a look at those sections that give us what is low power TV. You'll see the sections in there. What are the goals that we're aiming to achieve in acquiring low power TV? What are the obstacles, benefits, and then the costs? And you've done a lot of that research already. And that then would be tremendously useful in submitting back then to the city attorney's office this document about, here it is. Here's all your questions answered. And I think also in talking to Greg and the fact too that, I guess for the viewers, benefit in talking through then, Greg, the fact that the FCC, if you want to go into that, because this then could help, working on this project in the meantime, could help give us something to work towards in light of not being able to buy something in the immediacy that there's nothing available to, if that makes sense. And Greg can give the viewers that background then.
Yeah, it was because they were doing the Spectrum auction where they were auctioning off, trying to auction off a section of the Spectrum to make it available primarily for cell carriers to do more internet and cell service. And that auction finally ended, actually before our last meeting was going to occur. And then the next step was they're going to do a transition. So during this time, they've stated that they're not accepting applications for new, to start up a new channels anywhere. So we kind of knew that for the last year and a half, that we've kind of been in this waiting mode to see when is this auction actually going to end. So the auction part has ended. The next phase is they transition the existing channels that are still have their spectrum, they're part of the bandwidth, and they're going to be repacking them to squeeze them down together to free up the space for the people who purchased parts of the spectrum. And they've got a transition schedule that I found just the other day, and it looks like they don't get down to details exactly of, they do list which stations are being transitioned, but I don't know where those signals reach in terms of would they come out this way, but that's still part of the equation of we have to wait until they've finished repacking everything. And the Detroit area, which is the area that we are in, is in 2 phases. There are 10 phases for this transition. The phase 3 and phase 8 contain Detroit, and 3 is scheduled to be completed by June 21st, 2019, and phase 8 by March 13th, 2020. So that kind of signals to me that we have a couple more years, 2 years roughly, probably before we could apply to get our own station up and running, which should be plenty of time for us to get everything in lined up and figure out what can we do. So there's no immediate rush to get things done, as we kind of knew.
But also because of our meeting schedule though, too, then having that work done in between the quarterly meetings.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work on that and give it
Yeah.
a first pass and then pass it
Yeah.
on to Greg. And
Yep.
maybe a couple others who are interested in, putting their thoughts on it too.
Mhm. So does that sound like a
Very
a
doable.
viable option
Yeah.
then to try to move it forward?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. Otherwise, the only other option is to table it until at that time, but this work, if in fact then we wanted to revisit it, none of this work would be done then.
Right.
For us to assess how much is this gonna cost?
Yeah.
Do we have the funding within our own budget, or would we have to seek general fund allocate, that this helps to substantiate
Right. Sounds good.
the why?
Do you need a motion or something to continue moving forward on this, or?
No,
Okay.
I think it's just John volunteering that
Yeah.
he'll take a first pass at it, then that'll be reflected in the minutes. Because him and Greg had done a bulk of the work already, I think they already have it, it's just now putting it to paper. The only other, if you had a question though about that business case specifically though, or items within there, just send me a quick email.
Sounds good.
Because that was something that I had grabbed from IT just as an example. I don't know necessarily if ours will be that exact page length or that exact in depth, but it just gave you an example though of
Excellent.
how to substantiate the need and what that would look like.
Good. So, just to follow up on what our commenter said a moment ago, that Detroit PBS wasn't really aware of us out here and what we were doing. I feel like they have probably a very close operation, nonprofit, educational. We could probably learn a lot from them, so it might be a good opportunity for us to talk to them as we're filling this out and see what kind of thoughts they have too, and what they fill out for the same purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Now, on your low power, will you be able to run it out of this studio, or what? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's all the elements that we have to figure out. I don't know if a single signal will carry to the whole entire city, where that would have to be located. It strikes me that another staff person would be necessary in order to implement and
Your own
run.
little station.
Most likely, we'd have to have some consulting that we'd have to pay
Engineering
for.
report.
Yeah.
In essence, it's not much different than the traditional or the old non-HD broadcast television. It's just on a much smaller scale. The pattern can be adjusted within the FCC's regulations and allowances. So all that are detailed questions that will probably come up after we even find out whether there's a space allocated.
And that's not necessarily expertise that we have in-house that we would be able to.
Yeah, Tony, what we've found in some of our speaking to other broadcasters was that they work with very specialized engineers who can find that broadcast spectrum for you, and then they can design a map to let you know how your signal from a particular area would extend out from that point. So, yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we
Get
move
with it,
forward.
John.
Well, it sounds like the time frame is going to match up. There's a fair amount of work to do, but there's a fair amount of time to do that amount of work. So this is, I think,
To queue it
a
up
good
in
opportunity.
time, yeah.
As I noted at a past meeting, there are actually companies that will identify and act as a go-between for a percentage for the sale of low-power TV, existing low-power TV licenses that we could negotiate with when the time comes, and we know whether this portion of Michigan will have allocated to it low-power TV that would do us any good.
I got a question for John. Okay, so you're proposing to have a low TV station to broadcast all our 4 channels
Exactly.
to the surrounding area. Okay, and anybody within that area can pick it up over the free airwaves.
Correct.
Okay, this may be my concern maybe is that down the road, I mean, and then would Comcast still be obligated to carry us as
Yes.
they still be obligated no matter what. They can't come down 5 years saying, you guys got your own TV station, we don't want to deal with you anymore. So you guys, you got your own, so why? So their reasoning is why, if they are already on the air, why should we keep on broadcasting there through our cable system?
Dave, you bring up a great question, and as I was doing research, I found out that the service providers are actually required to carry the signal of a licensed broadcaster in the area if that licensed broadcaster requests it. So this actually might help us in our negotiations with AT&T, because as licensed broadcasters, they'd be required to carry us not as a PEG channel off in the distance somewhere, but as a regular broadcaster. But yeah, they're required to carry it. The other thing too is we're not really in competition with them. This is just another way of distributing the signal the same way as, say, Facebook or YouTube or is it Vibit?
Right, yeah.
Online.
Yeah, my concern was, I'm just concerned that, they might say, how come there's no need for us, Comcast has said there's no need for us to be a service here anymore, so,
They're legally obligated.
they're obligated no matter what.
As long as they have that license filed with the state and approved through the city for the period of that license, the parameters under which they filed remain. Now, they could try to reapply, or at the end of the license period, they could apply differently, but they can't just tell us bye-bye.
Right, but can they negotiate with the state, seeing that the state has more authority in the cables now, to change the rules of the game?
It would change the rules for the entire state as it pertained to the franchise agreement for the state, but the current agreement, though, would stand until that new agreement then. So if we were on a 10-year agreement,
Right.
if they negotiated a new agreement, that wouldn't supersede our current agreement. Our current agreement would carry through until it expired, and then at that point, we would need to be entering into a new agreement with Comcast.
But down the road, they could approach Lansing and say, and get the rules changed, so 20 years from now.
So
That could happen at any time, but keep in
Right.
mind, that's for the entire state. They wouldn't be changing it just for Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be just because of something Ann Arbor did. It would be the entire state that would, when they went through this process before, they spent millions and millions of dollars on this endeavor to create a state franchise agreement and not be working with local communities to negotiate individual agreements. That's a huge endeavor then that's also, it's not just AT&T, that's all the cable companies that came together then to move this through the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? That being the last agenda item, and I'd welcome a motion for adjournment.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Okay.